Hello, dreamy people, and welcome back to another exciting day in the Writer's Haven. I am your host, Helena, and I am joined today by Cecily Cooper, who is the visionary author of the book, The Transformative Power of a Name, which gives the account of 11 women who discovered the healing power in name identity. Thank you for joining me in the Haven, Cecily.
Thank you so much, Helena. I'm super excited to be in the Writer's Haven.
Well, listen, we're going to talk about writing, but first I want to talk about you and your name and how this book came to be. In whatever order you want to answer that question.
Wow. It's such an amazing story. So there, at times in one's life, come invitations that you just really feel like, I have to respond to this call, because this just feels like a once-in-a-lifetime call. And that call came when my pastor actually extended an invitation to go with him and a group of other people to Nigeria. We didn't know what to expect. I honestly thought it would be a vacation / tour. But when I got there, one of the most transformative experiences was when we found ourselves in a room filled with people, and we were called up one by one, and we were given names.
And you had no idea this was going to happen?
No idea that it was going to happen. In fact, when I started hearing the names of other people, you know, something in me just sort of shrank back, because it felt like a moment, but I had taught myself, because of disappointments in the past, to not expect anything major. But when he called my name, I heard the room gasp in unison with me. He called my name, Chinasa, and he said, God answers my prayers. Chinasa means God answers my prayers. And so I went from wondering, does God even hear my prayers, to being given a name, God answers my prayers. And it was a name that sort of served as a catalyst to so much inward transformation and healing. And the book is one of the, I would say, offspring to the what was started inwardly when that name was spoken outwardly over me. So,
Well,
yeah.
And what year was that?
That was in 2008.
And did you immediately embrace that process? Were you hesitant? Were you a little, like, not really sure about what was going on and whether or not this is something that you should or could hold on to?
It took a minute, honestly. I mean, to go from hearing a name that spoke to every inner critic that made me question, am I seen by God? Does he hear me? Does he care? And for me to travel to Nigeria and be before people that I'd never seen before and will probably never see again. So to have them choose that name that spoke to fears, insecurities, doubts, and actually unleashed an identity within me that was always there, but needed to be invited forward. So it was one of those moments in my life where I felt like amongst all of the people in the room, all of the people in the world, I felt like God was giving me that wink to say, I see you and I hear you.
And up to that point, there had been some pain in your life, just to, say it directly. Pain that a lot of us have felt in different ways in our lives, different kinds of pain. You know, no matter what it is that people are feeling, whether you're male or female, you go through things in your life that just causes you to not necessarily embrace the fulfilling things in life, because you're kind of drawn back into whatever that pain was in your childhood or in your adulthood or teen, whatever it is. you're drawn to it, and sometimes it's inescapable. It surrounds you, it succumbs you. And so you kind of took this journey not necessarily knowing what it was going to bring into your life, but you were open to whatever it was that was going to happen, and you're saying that it was transformative.
Yes.
At the end of the day. So you taught. Let's get into the book, the power of the name.
Yeah.
Of a name. So once you receive, and let's talk about your journey, and then we'll get into the details of the book. So once you received the name, and it took you a minute, as you said, to embrace the name. What about knowing that God answers your prayers?
Yes.
That's very, very specific. Not God answers prayers, but God answers your prayers.
Yes.
There's a lot of power in just
Personal.
that statement. How did you see the transformation come into your space?
You're taking me back with that question, because pain marked me. Rejection, abandonment, having a lot to do with encounters with people who should have protected me, who should have affirmed me and covered me. And so I'm not going to say that my childhood wasn't filled with joys and beautiful moments, because it was. My parents did what they could with the resources that they had at that time. But in many ways, they had not dealt with their own pain. And so as one of their children, we experienced some of their rough edges, their unaddressed wounds. And I remember as a child, I used to wait for my father to come and pick us up. He was a weekend dad, a faithful one. And because of what was going on in my home, when we were not with him during the week, I lived for the sound of the engine of his car. And the moments when he wouldn't come, when he said he would be there and he didn't show up, and he didn't pick up the phone, and he didn't explain why. You know, those moments as a little girl just sort of stay with you, and they create a narrative that you don't know enough to dispute. You don't know enough to counter. And so I just began to tell myself, I'm not seen. I'm not worthy of an explanation when I'm told one thing and the person doesn't deliver. The person doesn't follow through. And so I learned to lower my expectations, you know, and oftentimes we equate our Heavenly Father with the way we're treated by our earthly father. And so I just, you know, there were times when I felt like God was too busy, you know, when my prayers were going unheard, when I wondered if something I did even blocked them from reaching his ear, you know. So I didn't pray with faith. I didn't really expect an answer to prayers. I wanted, you know, one part of my mind believed that God could do it. Whether he could wasn't really the question. The question was, would he do it for me? And that was when I heard that name, God answers my prayers. That unlocked a faith, an expectation. It made me understand my position, and the title that he called me daughter. He calls me the apple of his eye, and he let me know that my prayers, you know, he always heard them, and not every single prayer would he answer, nor would I want him to answer, hindsight being 20/20 often. There are some prayers, and I'm like, thank you, Lord, for not answering those prayers. But he let me know, I hear you. You know, you were never out of my sight. I was with you when you were lying there on the floor with your ear pressed to the little mailbox hole at the bottom of the front door when I listened to my father or for my father's car. He let me know I was there. I was in the midst of every disappointment, every sense of abandonment. When I would come home and my dad had locked the door and I was unable to gain entrance at night, he let me know I was with you in the staircase where I would have to sleep until the morning, where I would go and try the lock again and it would be open. So yeah, that name, God Answers, my prayers just enveloped me and healed me in a way from all of the lies that I told myself, that the enemy of my soul told me, that I was not important. I was not relevant. I was not worthy of, praying those prayers and getting them answered, or feeling like I had any kind of authority attached to my sense of humanity. So it changed my life. And because pain oftentimes gives way to purpose, it sort of launched me in a direction that only God could have done. So
okay, so
yeah.
so let's talk about that direction and
Okay.
purpose. What was the genesis of actually taking your experience, the experience, inviting others to pour into this book, to have their experiences also included? What was the genesis in making that happen?
So I think about how purpose informs process. And I now know, as a result of the experience in Nigeria where I received that name and other experiences along the way, that I now realize were more than serendipitous. They were divinely ordered steps. And so my purpose is to help as many people as possible, particularly women, to be able to bounce back from setbacks related to, childhood trauma, so that they can get back what they were always intended to be, do, and have. And so that name sort of created a clarity around my purpose. And so I realized that I have been called to be a literary midwife. That's the name that I sort of answer to now. And that is also related to me giving birth to my one and only child, and just the whole experience around that birthing process. But I realize now that there are other women who have experienced trauma as well, and that because of the healing and the calling forth of my true identity, that I was now uniquely qualified to be able to go and sit in another woman's pain and help her to push past the not without addressing what happened, to push past it though, to acknowledge it, to be able to speak about it, and then to be able to push past it so that they can unleash their stories, and by unleashing their stories, their sense of voice is recovered and unlocked, their sense of identity, their true identity, not as it relates to what the pain, what the rejection, what the abandonment, what the abuse would say, but what God has to say, and the strength that comes about as results of being tested by fire. That all of that comes forth. And so being able to help women to tell their story, to be able to sit in their truth and know that they're not alone, and know that their story can help someone else to feel less alone. And so, yeah, it's amazing how purpose gives way to the process.
So all of you got together, you poured your heart and soul into the pages of the book, And this is a self-published work?
It is.
Okay. So talk to us about the process of actually, once you've gotten all of the stories together, you format it, you have a manuscript, how did you go about actually getting it published?
Well, one of the things as it relates to self-publishing is actually, learning all of the steps. And this is my second book. Learning the business of it, learning the technicalities, even as it relates to KDP. There are so many that seem minor details that can make all the difference in the world. But yes, just realizing that giving birth to the story, giving birth to the book is just the beginning. And so once the baby is here and I've helped the woman to push it out, now it's caring for the baby, and that part, I'll admit, I was not quite prepared for. But what I realized is that, one of the things that we don't often hear about as it relates to purpose is that skills are required. So we talk about purpose and we all want to have real clarity around our sense of purpose, but we also need certain competencies so that once that purpose is unlocked and we're clear and we're moving in it, we need to be able to lead people. And so helping people to meet deadlines and being able to coach someone who's very married to their stories of pain, to say, I want you to say more. You can go deeper. Or there are some details here that sort of distract from the main story. And so being able to coach someone who is still very connected to that and who may be raw in that moment is a skill.
And how long did that process take?
That process took 12 months. It was supposed to take 10 months, but I had to make some really important decisions, difficult decisions as it related to getting the book published. But yeah, it took 12 months start to finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how can I say this? How did you, so was it just the 11 or were there other people, a larger number of people who wanted to pour into this, and then you had to make some decisions about what would actually land in the book?
That's a great question. So there were other people who at the beginning of the journey shared my vision, thought the title was powerful, but who along the way, as I sort of conferred with them, especially as a fairly new published author, conferred with them, it became clear that our visions no longer aligned.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask you that is, our audience base is made up of writers and readers, and there are others who may be considering doing a compilation of work, no matter what it is, fiction or nonfiction, and you sit in the editor's chair, basically, and you have to make those tough decisions. Was it rooted in, just making sure that those stories aligned with the theme and the purpose of the book? Was that the main driver for making those decisions?
The main driver, yes, was making sure that the women felt like their stories were told with fidelity. And that they had a sense of autonomy as related to how the story was told. And I did have someone who would serve as the editor initially. And that's where, as the book went on and we were nearing publishing, there was some twists and turns, some unexpected pivots that I really honestly did not want to address. But if I were to remain true to the vision, and I did feel responsible for the stories that these women entrusted me with. So serving as one of the editors, it then became clear that I needed to move squarely in the editor's chair. and you know, just make sure that the women felt like, okay, this is the way I want the story to be told, and this is how I need to be spoken to as it relates to making changes.
Yeah,
so,
because, you know, there's a lot of vulnerability, and sometimes with that comes fear. And, you know, people may have had expectations, but may have pulled back a little bit. And as an editor, as the person that's kind of bringing it all together and making sure there's authenticity in the writing, not to say that there wasn't, but you know, to dig deeper, as you said earlier, about going deeper, to just kind of purge it onto the page, but at the same time in a way that, you know, their dignity is intact.
Sure.
If that was an issue for them.
Yes, I mean, I feel like they put their trust in me. They let me know we're saying yes because you asked, Cecily. And when someone puts that level of trust in you with painful parts of their lives that they have never spoken about in public, I take that very seriously. And so what I didn't realize, for anyone who might be interested in writing an anthology, was that I was carrying their pain in my heart. And oftentimes I wouldn't have the space to write my own story, my own painful story, because I was nurturing the woman and carrying her story. So learning how to create some margin, some space, so that I could then sit in my own, because there was no one to do that for me necessarily. Initially, I relied on an author or an editor to do that for me, but when it became clear that we needed to go our separate ways, that was part of the birthing process, where I needed to make some difficult decisions. And those decisions were along the cover of the book, the color, font size, everything was a decision. And there were times when I didn't want to make the decision. I wanted someone else to make the decision. But I had to be reminded that I had been called to lead these women through dark nights of the soul and bring them to the other side, where they could say, you know what, I'm proud of myself, that I was able to share this story. I'm stronger, and I am an author. And almost none of them could say that at the beginning of the journey. They could not declare that they are an author. And now they're bold women, very bold.
So what's next for you in terms
what's
of
next?
projects?
So I enjoy getting together with each woman, and we're spread out throughout the country. But I enjoy getting together and doing authors talks with them. So we pop up in different parts of the country. We find art galleries to have an authors talk. We find boutiques to have an authors talk. So forming strategic relationships with other businesses that one might not think has anything to do with authors, and partnering with them and sharing our stories and inviting people into the room to hear our stories, so that they are inspired to acknowledge their own story and go on a journey of unpacking some of the hurts, habits, and hang-ups, and sharing it so that somebody else feels like they have community in this shared human experience that we're all living.
Okay, and the name being the focal point in the book, how did the women, because I saw mom, I saw daughter, which are names, obviously, and there are, people will define them differently, depending upon what it means to them. How did you put out that call? How did you communicate that to the people who were selected to write?
So my selection process, I was looking for that woman who was interested in three things: a breakthrough, they knew that they needed to break free of a pain that has held them, or that had held them for so long. I was looking for a woman who was looking for an upgrade, who was looking to live a life filled with more opportunities to share, more courage, more confidence, a woman who just had a sense that there's something more for me, and then a woman who expected transformation. She knew that there was a greater version of herself that she had not met yet inside of her. So those were the women that I was looking for. And so I asked them to think. Honestly, this book was for a specific set of women that are not on that cover. I pledged a sorority back in 1988, and we were given line names. And those names, just when I think about the names that we were given when we were 18 years old, and how we have grown into those names, I was in awe. So I thought that this book would be for all 15 of us. I wasn't expecting that they would not be ready to take that journey with me. And so I looked around for other women in my life who were ready to go on that journey. And I asked them to think about a name that that activated their entire nervous system, a name that brought forth emotions. What name has had the greatest transformation on their lives, even if it was a negative name? Because sometimes we identify with names, particularly when we're young, that we don't know enough not to couple our souls to. And so for some of these women, this was an invitation to address that name, which would be a lie, which would represent a false sense of identity, to come out of agreement with that name and step into a name that more aligned with their Christian faith. And so, yeah, those were the women that I looked for, and that's how, they chose the names that they chose.
Okay, and how can people find you?
So people can find me on social media, on Instagram at Bounce Back Greater. I'm on Facebook under Cecily Cooper, and I just launched my podcast called Beyond the Bounce Back, How Setbacks Unleash the Inner Visionary. So you can find me on Spotify under Cecily Denise Cooper, my entire government name.
Well, Cecily, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your work with us.
Thank
and
you.
Everybody, again, here's the book, The Transformative Power of a Name. And Dreamcatchers, I hope you enjoyed my chat with Cecily Cooper. As always, you can find us socially on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at writershavenshow or at Author v. Helena. You can tune in and subscribe to our channels on YouTube, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Sonos, Alexa, SoundCloud, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, basically wherever you get your streaming fix. So thanks for tuning in, and until next time, catch fire on purpose.